What's your name?
My name is Stephanie Hicks.
What is your race?
I am African American.
So considering your wealth growing up, would you consider yourself to have been lower middle class, or of a higher middle, higher class?
I would consider my SES growing up to be lower middle class.
How long did you go to school, and where and what degree did you get?
I went to, I feel like I've been in school forever. The answer to your question is for my PhD, that process took from 2010 to 2017, so 7 years for my PhD, and I got my PhD at the University of Illinois at Chicago.
How long? I just asked that question twice now. Was the school you attended demographically varied?
You're asking about my PhD?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, the school that I went to, the University of Illinois at Chicago, was diverse, was demographically diverse. Do you want me to explain more about it?
Yeah, sure.
So there were a large amount of students of color at the school. The University of Illinois at Chicago is also, I believe, a Hispanic serving institution, so lots of Latino students. There are many immigrant students and first generation American citizens and first gen college students, many of whom were also students of color. So yeah, it was a diverse place. In fact, I think the University of Illinois at Chicago undergraduate student body has no clear racial or ethnic majority. So there is a large mix, if you want to say that, of students. Yep.
Were there many people of your race and gender there?
I would say yes, comparatively speaking. Yes, there were many people of my race and gender at UIC. So there were many Black folks and many Black American folks and many women there. Although at the same time, even though there were a lot, that was a small proportion of the students. So there were a lot of students at UIC, but I believe for undergraduates, the percentage of African American students hovered between 6 and 8%, I believe, at the time. So that shakes out to be a lot of people because it's a large school, but it is a small percentage school.
Did you work hard in elementary, high school, university school, and to get to where you are today?
I did work hard in elementary school. Probably not in preschool. I did work hard in elementary school, in middle school, and in high school and college, and throughout my master's and PhD. I went to public schools that were pretty competitive, and so I felt like I had to work hard because that was the environment that I was in. Students were really concerned about grades and academics, and so I felt like I worked hard to do as well as my peers. So yes, yeah.
What was your GPA while in university and your highest form of education?
My GPA while I was in undergrad, my GPA was probably somewhere around a 3.5. It may have been higher than that. I don't exactly remember. In graduate school, my GPA was higher. My GPA was closer to a 4.0, so I would say a 3.8 or 3.9.
Do you feel that your current job is a reflection of how hard you worked?
I do feel my current job is a reflection of how hard I worked. Yeah, I am now a faculty member at one of the most noted public universities in the country, and so yeah, in some ways, yes, I think there's a relationship between that and how hard I worked.
Do you feel that your salary compares equally to those of your coworkers, like men, women, and people of other ethnicities?
That is a great question. I do not know if my salary compares to my peers. I think that it is probably on par with lots of other women who do my job. I would not be surprised if my salary was lower than some men who have the same job, but I am not sure, so I don't. Those are just guesses.
Um, if you're comfortable answering what your salary range is, we have options of 20 to 50,000, 50 to 80,000, 80 to 100,000, 100 to 125, and over 125,000.
It is, my salary is that 50 to 80,000 in the range.
All right. Throughout your childhood, were you pushed toward certain jobs according to your gender, race, etc.? And an example of this would be if you're a woman, you were pushed toward being like a secretary and nurse rather than a CEO or a doctor.
I don't think that I was pushed towards certain professions because of, well, I'll say it like this. I think in some ways I was pushed towards some professions because of my race and my gender. I was a ballet dancer when I was a child, so that was at some point something that I thought I was going to be, and I definitely think there's a connection between that and gender. I think that not only was it something I was actually taking part in, I understand that because I'm a woman, that was something that was also seen as way more acceptable for me to probably pursue. I was, I think, encouraged to just simply, if I wasn't going to do that, to be a professional in whatever field. And so I think I went through the normal, and I was pushed through the normal. Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a lawyer? Do you want to be, I come from a family of teachers. Do you want to be a teacher? So I don't know. I think that's somehow connected to race and ethnicity. I think there was a push on the part of my family to make sure that I wanted to be a middle-class professional. Yeah, and I think that is connected actually to my race and ethnicity, because I think coming from a lower middle class family, there was this real interest in me being successful, and that meant having, I think, a middle class job.
So. Do you feel you fairly earned the position you currently hold, or do you think some outside force like racism, wage gap, patriarchy is preventing you from climbing higher corporatively?
Well, so I forget the beginning part of the question, but I do. Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah. Do you feel you've fairly earned the position you currently hold, or do you think some outside force like racism or the patriarchy is preventing you from climbing higher corporatively?
Well, I do think I fairly got to the position I hold, but at the same time, I also know that, so I am not a tenure track faculty member, and non-tenure track faculty members tend to be disproportionately more people of color and disproportionately more women. So in university structures, there are faculty, folks who teach, and there are different levels of faculty. There are what I am, which is a lecturer. There are tenure track faculty, and those are faculty members who are on the process to get, or who have tenure and make up more senior levels of faculty. And essentially, when you have tenure, you have a academic job for life. Lecturers and adjunct faculty, so who are faculty with a little bit less, or a lot less depending, job security. Those faculty members tend to be, in some spaces, there are way more people of color who hold those jobs, and there are way more women. So I do think there is a connection, from, maybe not from me specifically, but if you look at my job holistically and you look at faculty holistically, lots more women of color have less stable faculty positions in universities. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. And reversely to that question, do you feel you fairly earned the position you currently hold, or do you think that you have been promoted due to having a certain privilege over those around you?
I don't think that I have been promoted because of any privilege that I have. I think I am where I am fairly, and that I haven't received any benefits that have anything to do with anything outside of the way I do my job, or how well I do or don't do it.
Do you feel that the amount of time you have worked at the company is helping or hindering you from reaching your full potential within the workforce?
Oh, I'm pretty new here, so I think that I do believe that there's lots of opportunity. I don't think that the length of time that I've been here has hindered me in any way.
Do you feel that being a woman in the workplace hinders you?
Yes, in a general sense, I do feel that being a woman in the workplace can hinder me. So, and I think in this specific workplace, in my specific job, I have not had many instances of that, but I do think in academia in general, being a woman and being a woman of color faculty member, I do think that is something that I always think about, like, could this hinder me? Will there be instances that come up in which my womanness or my blackness will hinder me in my career trajectory?
What could be done to fix these issues of the discrimination of women in the workforce?
Goodness. Well, ending the patriarchy could be one way of taking care of issues of discrimination in the workforce. But I mean, I think that there are lots of different ways. I mean, I think it depends on what part of the problem or what part of the experience of women that is discriminatory that you're talking about. If we're talking about discrimination in terms of even being hired or even being interviewed or being recruited for positions, I think that has a lot to do with how academic searches are done. So where are people looking for candidates when they are looking for people coming out of PhD programs? Are they only looking at PhDs or newly minted PhDs from certain schools and certain programs? Because if you're looking in very narrow ways, you may not see the candidates you want. Also, if you are in a field that just as a whole doesn't have a lot of women graduating through it. So I think of maybe one good example is STEM fields, in the STEM fields in academics, so science, technology, engineering, and math. That's a space where people are always talking about why the lack of women or why don't they see women in those spaces, and that I think that has a lot to do with not looking for candidates far and wide, but that also has to do with at the educational level when people are getting their masters, getting their PhDs, if you're not letting those students into programs and if you're not getting students through those programs, then they can't be candidates for jobs because they're not getting through them. So I think when it comes to identifying candidates and hiring, there's just a line of pipeline problems. I think if it comes to pay, those are things that are harder to pin down because across a university, different departments, what kind of department you're in, and the structure for pay, I think, could be different. Also, the rank that you're in could have something to do with your salary. And so those are policy issues that people really have to take a hard look at and start talking about the actual pay gaps that there are and why they're there. And then there's probably a host of other discrimination issues around women in the workplace that I'm probably not even recalling or thinking of. But I think some of it is policy. I think some of it is getting people to think about their interactions with each other and the things that they're saying and doing on a day-to-day basis in addition to larger structural things.
All right, and my last question, do you have any advice for women growing up with stereotypes and discrimination and how to succeed?
Oh, goodness. I guess the advice that I would have for women growing up and facing stereotypes and thinking about how to succeed would be that you should know that sexism, much like racism, much like classism, are, I believe, baked into the fabric of our society. So they are going to be a part of your experience. Whether or not you anticipate it and whether or not you feel like you see it, those forces are always going to be at play. So I think that remembering that and knowing that can actually be something that is, it doesn't confine me. It reminds me that the playing field isn't equal to begin with. And at the same time, I guess I just have to focus on the work that I'm trying to do and find people to do that work with who are constantly resisting sexism, resisting racism. So so know the context that you're in, and consistently try to find people who also know the context that you're in and can help support you and give you the best, I don't know, mentorship or support as you're trying to make it through to whatever career field you're going into.